True fear is when you wake up from a dream, then you realize it was not a dream that woke you. It's the unexplained noises when you're home alone, knowing that the sounds are too intentional to just be the house settling. Fear is the quick flashes of shadow that you see out of the corner of your eye, and it's accompanied by that unnerving sensation of being watched. It's the long, empty, dimly lit hallways of your work after hours when you're there all alone. That's when you feel the little hair standing up on the back of your neck and have that ball of terror coiled in the pit of your stomach, and your heart is drumming so loudly that you're nearly deafened by it. You should never ignore your fears, our dear foofers, because one day it could just save your life. Good evening. Okay, this is going to be a special show. Our first Halloween story time.
Yay!
What do you think of that?
I like it.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yep.
We got to mention the email, of course. Our email is pfableorfact@proton.me, and it'll be in the show notes. And then, of course, we have our Facebook page. One thing I wanted to mention from the last show is... We did, because I don't think we made the point enough when we were talking about when I was talking about the bomas and the lighting of the bonfires and the patrols and stuff. The reason they were doing that is because those were tried and true methods that they had been using for centuries. And the reason they use them is because they're successful at keeping lions out.
Yeah.
So these proven methods were just completely ignored by the Ghost in the Darkness. Also, when we were going over the part with the trap, I said that they packed it together, kind of like they stacked it on top of it. Oh. No, it took them weeks to build.
Oh, wow.
It was very sturdy. They used, heavy-duty screws and nails, and I even think they used the railroad spikes and stuff.
Oh, wow.
To stamp this thing together. It was a sturdy cage, and it was meant to be the death place of one of these lions.
Wow.
And it didn't work. So, because I think I said they packed them together, like they just kind of stacked them.
Yeah.
Like Legos or something.
Yeah.
So, of course, this is going to be a Halloween special. So, there's no real rules or red flags or inarguable truths. These are my parents' stories that they told us growing up, and I think we even forgot some of them. I think they forgot some of them, because it's been so long, and I think even I have forgotten some of them. Because my dad was talking about another one just today, and I was like, I don't think we got that one on the tape.
Yeah.
But hopefully I'll remember some of them, and maybe I can tell them.
Yeah, maybe.
You know? So the first story is a trip, because my dad drove trucks for like almost 40 years.
Right.
And, you have the trucker stories, the typical trucker stories.
Right.
In fact, there's websites. There's podcasts just on trucker stories because there's so many.
Right.
Some of them are really similar.
Yeah.
And one of them that always comes up is this girl in white or a lady in white.
Here we go, the lady in white.
Yeah, and this is my dad's story because he saw something like this.
Right.
And it actually, well, I don't want to go too into it. Let's listen to the story and then we'll talk about it.
We would start like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and where Jimmy and I were going down to San Diego, and we got on that old Alexandro Road, which is now the 215, and it was foggier than heck, a lot of fog, real thick fog. I was following Jimmy. I was a fairly new driver with a company, so I was following Jimmy, and I told him, don't leave me in the fog. And of course, he took off. And I was doing about 45 miles an hour with my four-ways on, and I lost him in the fog. So I just kept doing my thing, doing 45 miles an hour. And this tanker, a fuel tanker, passed me. doing about 55. And I got on his tail. I started following him for as long as I could. Then I lost him too. So then I just stayed in the slow lane. All of a sudden, I noticed something up ahead, and I looked, and on the fog line, there was this 17, 18-year-old girl, soaking wet, with a white dress on, sitting there on the fog line, looking down. And as I got closer, she turned and looked right into my eyes. She looked right at me.
You locked eyes with her, right?
Yeah, I locked eyes with her, and after I passed her, I looked in the mirror, and there was nothing there. So after that, it kind of woke me up, made me extra alert. And about a mile, 2 miles down the road, I see this flashing light, and I figured it was a car crossing the road because there wasn't a freeway back then. There would be in the cars in the medium.
Yeah, they had stop signs.
And yeah. They would cross from the medium. They run all the way across the road. Anyway, I guess I had approached. All of a sudden, I realized it was a car in my lane. I swerved to the right. I looked real quick. There was nobody next to me. I swerved to my right. By that time, I was in the fast lane. I had moved over. I don't know why. Maybe because of the young lady. Yeah. So I swerved to the right, and I saw the tanker sitting out in the dirt. And I avoided the car. The guys were running. There was like 3 or 4 guys running around with flashlights trying to make me miss the car. And at the last minute, I did miss the car by probably 2 feet. And I went on down the road. I got to Rancho, and we used to have coffee at Denny's. And I parked my truck behind Jimmy's truck. He was already there. The other driver, he was already there. So I went into the coffee shop, and I was mad as heck. And I told him, "Why the heck did you leave me? What the heck did you leave me?" And he was shaking. He was scared to death. He said, "Man, I almost hit the tanker. The tanker hit a car, and I almost hit the tanker." He said, "I had to go out into the dirt." And he had a set of doubles, and I had a set of doubles. And he said he went out into the dirt to avoid the tanker because the tanker hit the car. So
he's like going to lose control. Man.
Right, so I kind of calmed down. I wasn't mad at him anymore because I saw how scared he was. He was more scared than me. And then I told him, I asked him, "Did you see that young girl? That young girl was sitting there on the fog line?" And he said, "No, I didn't see any girl." I said, "Yeah, she was right on the fog line. She was in a white dress, soaking wet." And he goes, "No, I didn't see any girl." So we went on down to San Diego, made our deliveries to the stores in Nordstrom's down in San Diego, came back, and I was told the very next day when I came to work, the other 3 drivers came to me and they got around me and they said, "You know that you saw the lady in white?" I said, "The lady in white?" He said, "Oh yeah, she's very famous on the old Alexandro road. It was a young girl that I guess she was going to her prom, and they got in a car accident and she got killed." I said, "Well, she sure saved my bacon because she made me extra alert and kind of
woke you up."
Woke me up, yeah. Exactly. So that's the story of the lady in white.
Okay, that's a really good story. The thing is that the lady in white, the young girl going to prom, gets killed, people see her on the highway. It's an urban legend.
Right.
There's probably hundreds of these stories across
the
United
nation.
States. Yeah. I think probably even in Europe.
Probably.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah.
But this is that one. This is the local one. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most about my dad's story was because he saw her, he actually changed lanes. Because she was on the fog line and on the slow lane.
Where he missed hitting anything.
Right. And it made him more alert. And because he was like, "Oh, what was that? What did I just see?" So he was on edge.
Right.
So when he saw that car in his lane with its headlights aiming at him, he had the frame of mind and the ability to move over.
Yeah, and be cautious.
And dodge that car. Yeah. And if he hadn't seen that young girl in the slow lane, he might have been in the slow lane, and there might have been other complications. I don't know.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's just a trip when you think about it. But
yeah.
That was a story that my dad always told us because he said that all the drivers had seen that
girl.
specter. Yeah, that
Yeah.
some lady in white standing on the side of the road. All of them, baby.
Probably trying to make them cautious while they're driving, because you know how you could get zoned out, especially if you're just starting your shift.
Yeah.
You know, the coffee hasn't kicked in.
Yeah.
You're just kind of zoned. You're just waking up. You're just trying to start your day. You zone out, and you're like it's kind of scary sometimes when you're driving. You can like get in a trance, and it's very spooky.
Almost like a guardian, like a guide.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
It's a trip. Mm-hmm. But inevitably they're scared when they see her, or they're confused. They're like, what was that? You know?
Yeah.
Because it's not something, especially when you check your. I mean, I used to drive a truck too. I drove for about 3 years, and when you check that side mirror, I mean, you can see all the way down your trailer.
Right.
And if you just pass something goes by your cab, and you look in that side mirror and there's nothing there, that's
spooky.
That'll make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up.
That's spooky.
What was that? What did I just see?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that was that story.
Okay.
And I think that's probably the most tame one, because the rest of them are pretty freaky.
Yeah.
But and we have to apologize about my parents. They have a pair of cockatiels, a male and a female. And I think the only bird louder than them is probably lovebirds. Lovebirds are loud, but these cockatiels, for some reason, if nobody's in the front room with them, they just meek, 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 and squeal and squeak and chirp, and you can hear them in the background. It sounds like, I don't know, it's kind of annoying, and we have to apologize for that, but there's just no getting around it.
Yeah.
We were recording on my parents' table.
Kitchen table,
yeah, and the dog was even barking outside.
Yeah.
And let's move on to the next story.
Okie dokie.
This happened to me when I was probably around the age of 8, and my family, we moved from Texas to Michigan. My family was, I guess, picking cucumbers.
They were migrant workers.
Yeah, they were migrant workers, and I was about 8, and we lived in the big house, because we were with my cousins. There was a big house, and we had a tornado coming in our direction one day, and my grandmother grabbed holy water and wet the back of the house where the tornado was coming from, that area, and made a cross with holy water, and then she threw salt on it, and it was a white cross. And we could see the tornado miles away coming in our direction, and I don't know, it got maybe within a mile of our place, and it went to the left, but it was still strong enough where some branches and the trees behind our small house fell on the roof and scared the heck out of my aunts. They threw me underneath the bed. I was about 8 years old. They threw me underneath the bed. I don't know if that would have helped me any if that tornado would have kept coming, but that's, to them, that was a safe place, I guess. And
so by doing the cross, the tornado.
Yeah, the tornado changed direction. Actually went to the left and missed our house.
That's crazy.
But it did break some branches on our big trees that were around the house and scared the heck out of my aunt.
That story about the tornado always fascinated me, because, I mean, I looked it up later, and it is common for tornadoes to sometimes just change direction, just randomly, you know. So one could say, well, she could do whatever she wished. She could have painted a 747 on the side of the building. It wouldn't have made any difference if you're of that mindset. But when you see a tornado coming at you full speed, and she goes out there, wind's blowing everywhere, I mean, it's coming. My dad said it. He didn't go into detail, but I remember from when he was telling me when I was a kid, he said the sky was black, and the tornado was it looked like it was jet black, and it was just coming and it sounded like a monster. They could hear it just, I mean, it was just coming. It had like a low groan to it, and they could just see crap just flying all over the sky, and it was throwing wood, and I mean, it was just a big, massive, it was probably several miles wide, is what he was saying, and it was coming. I mean, it was moving, and instead of them going, because they had shelters and stuff, instead of them going into the shelter, she went out there with holy water and made a cross towards this tornado, and she just stood there, and the tornado went and veered away from their property.
Well, she didn't stand outside.
She was standing right there in front of the building.
When it went by?
When the tornado went by, yeah. They were all outside. That's why he said when you heard the ants, his tias heard the stuff landing on the roof, they were all scared. But nobody went to the shelter. They all stayed outside. They threw my dad under the bed. Oh, that's what he was saying.
Your dad stayed in the house.
Yeah, they threw him under the bed, but everybody else just kept doing their thing. They were just standing there watching the tornado, and like they knew.
They had faith in your grandma.
They had faith. If they knew that because she went out there with the holy water and she did that tornado was not going to harm them. That's always got
that's fascinating.
Oh, there you go, God boy. You just can't go one show without talking about Jesus.
Anyway, if you don't believe, that's fine. You could say it was coincidence. It just veered off at the last second. I choose not to believe that. I think that their faith, their belief, whatever you want, a positive energy, if you're not a religious person, their maybe positive way of thinking, I don't know, karma maybe, I don't know, whatever you want to conjure up. I don't, luck, even, but whatever the case may be, and it would have been my great-grandmother. Once my great-grandmother did that, the tornado veered, which I've always found fascinating. So let's move on to the next story.
Okie doke.
And in that same area, one day my cousins, like myself and maybe two of my cousins, were playing out near the street. And it was kind of like a clear day, but there was a few big clouds up in the sky. And we were just running around playing. I don't know what the heck. I don't even remember exactly what we were playing, but we were out there on the side of the street. And I looked up, and in between these two clouds, I saw this woman totally dressed in black on a broom. And it went into another cloud. And then I told my cousins, hey, I just saw a witch on a broom. And they laughed and said, yeah, sure. I said, no, it went into that big cloud. Watch, it's going to come out again. And we all looked up. And sure enough, it came out of the first cloud that it went into, and I don't know, we saw it for a few seconds and then went into a larger group of clouds, and we didn't see it anymore. But to this day, I will swear in the Bible that it was a woman dressed in black on a broomstick.
You said she was kind of like a young blonde lady, too. But when we were kids, I remember you said she was she had long blonde hair.
Maybe.
She was wearing like a black dress, like the...
No, it was solid black.
Yeah.
It was solid black.
Okay, the one about the witch. I mean, this was when he was a kid. He was like 8 years old when it happened. So we're talking 60 plus years.
Right.
So my dad has trouble
remembering the whole story.
Details, right.
Yeah.
But I remember when we were younger, and you can hear me actually say it in the recording, Yeah. I remember when we were young, you told us it was that she was actually a pretty lady, a white lady with blonde hair. And she was on the broom, and when the kids saw it the second time, when he said, look, watch that cloud, and they all looked up, and when she flew from the cloud, she actually leaned towards them and looked and gave them like a dirty look, scowling at them as she flew and disappeared into the other cloud. And all of them went, screamed, and all ran inside because it scared the crap out of them. And my dad said that, I don't remember that. I thought she was too far, but I remember when we were kids.
Yeah.
This is like, only 35 years for me. So
right.
I remember when he used to tell us that story, but it's hard to remember and stuff. And maybe my brothers remember it different. I don't know.
Yeah, so, that's true.
But those kind of things, those flying humanoids and stuff, mm-hmm. They're seen all over Mexico.
Is that why they stopped saying UFOs and start saying the UFAs or UPAs?
UAPs.
Oh yeah, UAPs.
Yeah. UFAs.
UFAs, UFTs.
I think partially okay. For stuff like that, maybe. But I also heard that...
Could you imagine you're like in an airplane and all of a sudden you look out the window and there's just this woman on a broom?
As a matter of fact...
That would be weird.
I showed you that clip. It went viral.
Yeah,
of that FedEx guy. And there's a broomstick, an old-fashioned broomstick, just hovering in the air by itself.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I saw
that. And I mean, I don't know. You could say,
who knows,
CGI, whatever, but it doesn't look like CGI to me because he's driving under it.
Yeah. Well,
he's tripping out. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
It's easy to say, well, there's no such thing as witches. People can't fly on broomsticks, but who knows?
I'm on that point where I don't know to believe or not to believe because I don't know what you saw. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to presume that you're just a straight off liar. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm going to be like, wow, that's amazing.
My dad's not one to lie.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying.
Well, no, I'm saying I'm agreeing with you. My dad's not one to lie. He's not one to make up stories.
No, he's not.
And this is something that he didn't tell us until we were already teenagers when he started telling us the stuff that happened to him when he was a kid. And primarily, the reason he was telling us these stories is because of what happened to us in that house.
Ah, that makes sense.
So as we were talking about the house, he was like, well, stuff happened to me when I was a kid too. I remember this and this, and that's when he started telling us all this stuff.
That's interesting.
So let's go on to the next story without further ado.
Yes, sir.
In the same area there, before we moved into the small house, my cousins and I and my whole family, we lived in a big, large house. It was a 2-story house. And one of my cousins, his name was Ramon, he was asleep up in the living room. And this shadow approached him and woke him up. And my cousin was probably about 18 then. And he looked up at this black shadow. And my cousin said, "Are you from this world or the next?" And the shadow answered him and said, "I am from the next, and I want you to come with me." My cousin said, No, man, I'm too tired, I'm sleepy. Come with me. So that shadow was a little more forceful, so my cousin said, all right. He says, "I want you to come with me because I want to show you where to dig." So my cousin followed him outside, and it was one of the big those pump wells for our water. And it was kind of like a big hump in the earth where the well was. And in one of the corners of that well, this black shadow went over and pointed at the ground and said, "I want you to dig here." My cousin said, "Oh man, I'll dig in the morning. I'm too tired." He said, "No, you have to dig now. I want you to dig now." And my cousin turned around and he goes, "No, man, I'm going back to bed." And he started walking toward the door, and that shadow attacked him, grabbed him, and my cousin started screaming. My grandfather and one of my uncles came running down the stairs, and they found my cousin collapsed inside the doorway. And they picked him up, and he told them what happened. And probably 3 years later, we were back in Texas, and he was about 21 then. And he was down in Reynosa, Mexico. He was 21 with about 3 friends. And of course, they had been drinking and they were goofing around, and they're coming around the corner, and his buddy that was driving was so drunk he lost control, and he ran into this steel boxcar stopper, for a train. But they were only doing about 25 miles an hour, so they all laughed, and they were laughing and stuff. And then they looked over at my cousin, and he passed away. He had a broken neck, and I think that black shadow finally came after him, and finally, I guess.
So he did have a broken neck.
Yeah, he died. Oh, he passed away.
Okay, that story always got to me because and I think my dad was kind of nervous, doing the recording.
Yeah.
Because at first they said when they found he would be my second cousin, but when they found him collapsed in the doorway, they thought, you just had a nightmare.
Yeah.
That's what they were telling him.
Right.
But when he couldn't get up.
Yeah.
He was scratched and his clothes were torn. And when they started picking him up, they realized he was bleeding from his head because it had actually pulled some of his hair out of his head.
Oh, wow. Because
it was trying to grab him. He said he fought with all his might. I mean, it was trying to drag him back to that spot.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, and we'll go into it in a little bit here because there's like an old belief in Mexico about treasure. And we'll go into that. But basically, it wanted him to dig then for a specific reason. And since he didn't dig, whatever had been buried there wasn't going to be there anymore. And they already knew that. Mm-hmm. So nobody bothered going out there and digging the next day, to see what it...
Yeah.
And my dad left that apart. He said it actually told him dig there, and to stall, his cousin was like, dig where? So it actually picked up a stick and drew an X.
Oh, wow.
And the X was there the next day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It drew an X in the dirt and said, there, I want you to dig there. And that's when he said, nah, I'm going back to bed. And it attacked him. And the thing about when he was down in the car with his friends, they were goofing around. And I guess he had lost control and they ran off the road, and he had applied his brakes, but because they were on dirt or sand or something, the car kind of slid and bumped this railroad tie thing.
Yeah, okay.
And it's so lightly that I don't even think it damaged the car. That's why they were all laughing, like, ha, you idiot, you know, you lost control.
Yeah.
And somehow his neck was broken, my cousin. And as it was, and that's the thing, another part that, like, that's why I say I think my dad was nervous recording. As he was fighting it, it kept threatening him. If you don't dig, I'm going to get you. And he's freaking out, screaming, yelling for help. And it's telling him, don't, come with me. You have to come. You have to dig. If you don't, I'll come and get you. I'll come and get you. And that's why they thought when he died so young,
that death came and got him.
This thing came and got him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
that's crazy.
Trippy story. Yeah. And his cousin, he said that cousin was the one that showed him how to shoot marbles and showed him how to use tops, how to hit battle with tops and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, those old wooden tops?
Yeah, yeah.
With the cord. Those are way before my time, but he remembers that cousin, even though he was 18 and my dad was only like 7 or 8, he actually took the time to show his little cousin how to shoot marbles and stuff. So he was a good kid, you know.
Yeah.
You did genealogy on my second cousin, Ramon, right?
So Ramon was born in 1939 and he died in 1959. He was 19 years old. He was Tia Nieva's child, which is your Grandma Petra's oldest sister.
But anyway, let's move on to the next story, shall we?
Okie dokie.
Oh, and by the way, that later we found out, my grandfather told us that if he had listened to that black shadow and dug where he told him to dig, it was probably going to be rewarded with a treasure, some kind of a treasure. We don't know what kind of treasure it would have been, but it was probably good sized gold or whatever.
And then your grandfather said that if you see a candle.
Yeah. Also, my grandfather says, if you see a little fire on the ground that looks like a candle, you go and dig there. When you see it, you can also find treasure.
And it'll try to discourage you.
Yes. You'll see all kinds of evil things. You might see a snake. You might see a wolf. You might see a bear. You might see a mountain lion. Something trying, or you might even see a raging bull trying to discourage you from digging. But you keep on digging anyway, and you'll get the treasure.
That one was just talking about clarifying the whole digging thing, because apparently this was like a belief in that area about these treasures. If you see like a little light or a little flame near the ground, that you're supposed to go out there and dig. And if you dig while you see that flame, there'll be something there. But if you see the flame and go later and dig there won't be anything there. And while you're digging, all kinds of stuff will try to scare you away. Yeah. To discourage you from continuing to dig, because apparently they put like some kind of curse to guard their treasure or something. Oh. Really weird, but it's
interesting.
My great-grandfather told my dad that, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we don't have to comment on that anymore.
No.
Let's move on to the next story.
Another story my grandfather told me was about when he was traveling through Mexico with a friend. They had been walking all day, and they spent the night under this bridge, railroad track bridge. And in the morning, they got up and they wandered into the small town, and had this man all tied up in the middle of the placita and surrounded by people. They had to tie him up because he had rabies, and that he was trying to tear his own body, bite his own body, and bite everybody around him. So they had him all tied down. And, my grandfather had never seen that before. He and his friends were shocked. And then I guess one of the gentlemen there, I said, where are you guys from? And they said, oh, we're from such an area. And my grandfather said, we just slept underneath this railroad tracks. He said, oh, man, you guys are lucky. He said, this man that's got the rabies came into our town from that direction, the same direction you guys just came in. He said he would have probably tore you both up. He would have probably killed both of you. So that was one of the stories that my grandfather told me in one of his little traveling adventures.
That story has always tripped me out, too. That was a story of my great-grandfather. I don't think my dad, he did mention it later. I think what he was doing is the way the recorder works. He started talking,
Yeah.
And then he would hit the record button.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes it just sounds like he's just talking in.
Yeah.
But my great-grandfather was an orphan. So he spent a lot of time wandering around looking for work when he was young. And that's why he was wandering through this little area in Mexico looking for work. Because he did farm work. He was a sharecropper.
Yeah.
And the stories about my great-grandfather are true. He passed away when my dad was a teenager, so we never got to meet him. But he's a trippy character, man. Some of the stories my dad...
And he raised your dad.
He basically raised my dad, yeah. And he would go hunting for cottontail with rocks.
Yeah, I remember your dad telling us those stories.
Throw rocks so hard and so accurately, he could kill rabbits. It's hard enough to shoot a rabbit with a rifle.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine being able to pick up a rock. The rabbit takes off running, and you just and nail it in the head and kill it and take it home to eat it. That's just amazing to me. And it was well known that he would do that. My great-grandfather, he'd just go out there. Yeah, I'm going to go get some rabbits, pick up some rocks, and go walk off and come back with 2 or 3 rabbits.
Wow, that's interesting.
Just bashing them in the head with the rock, just throwing it. So my great-grandfather was a character that I've always admired. He would wear like a little safari hat. Uh-huh. When they were working on the field, 'cause, again, he was a sharecropper.
Yeah.
And he would always walk every morning. He would go for a walk, like it was almost dark when he would leave. And he would always come home with fresh. He would pick them out in the fields and stuff, these tomatillos.
Oh, yeah.
And every morning he would have 2 scrambled eggs and tomatillo sauce on it. That's what was his breakfast every morning. And he would always somehow find tomatillos growing out in the wild. So he's just a trippy character, but... That story with this rabid man, he said he was like a wild animal, that he was growling and snarling, and people were saying, "Oh, he's a werewolf,"
Yeah.
Because he didn't even look human. I mean, his face was
they
filthy
probably didn't know a lot about rabies back then, did they?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But they knew enough. I guess the police tackled him, and it took like 4 or 5 guys.
Wow, that's crazy.
To subdue him. That's how strong he was. And that's why they said, man, you're lucky, because just 2 young kids, 2 young teenagers, he would have killed him. The guy would have killed him. So I think that's enough about that.
Okay,
Let's move on to the next story.
My mom became very ill with Parkinson's disease and also with cancer in parts of her body. And I have 5 sisters. We all took turns taking care of my mom. I brought her here to my home, and it was about at the end of her life. And when she passed away, now the doctor told me she knew by, I guess, taking the blood pressure and seeing her the last day, that my mom might not make it home, because my mom's wish was to die in her own home, and she said, if you can't keep your promise, don't feel bad. So I called my youngest sister who lived with my mom, and I said, my mom is very ill. Do you want to come and check her, or do you want me to take her home? She says, get her home. And she made it in the medical van. She made it all the way home. I talked to her, and she did make it, and she did pass away at home. When a few days later, after this, of course, we were all heartbroken. The funeral was over. And at that time, I smoked, and I walked outside to have a cigarette, and I have a huge oak tree in my backyard. And I had this urge to look up, and I had never seen anything like it. It between the branches was a perfect heart. The leaves had formed a perfect heart. I could see the sky through the heart. My mother's name was Valentina, which is Valentine, and her birthday was on Valentine's Day. And then months after that, I was walking into the bathroom area, and in the mirror, the large mirror, I looked up and I saw my mother behind me. It startled me. It was just for a few seconds, but I saw her in the nightgown that she would wear. And I called my sister and told her, I said, I just saw my mom. She wasn't angry. She wasn't sad. It was almost as if she were asking for something. I said, I think she wants her tombstone, because we had been talking about it, and my sister wanted to set it up for her, and we hadn't quite gotten to it, and I think that's what she wanted. And so immediately we headed down to, what is the name of the cemetery?
Rose Hills.
Oh, Rose Hills. And made the arrangements, and we both helped to pay for the expense, and my mom had her tombstone. I never saw her again. And then months later, I was sitting outside, and I looked up, and I saw a butterfly I had never seen before. It was yellow and black, but the outer wings were black, and the center was yellow, but the black part formed a V, and I thought, wow, gosh, it's a V, V for Valentina. Well, then, like 2 weeks later, I saw another butterfly, also in the same coloring, the same lettering. There were two butterflies, and they both had V's. Well, my mom was Valentina and my father was Victor. Both of their names started with a V, and I thought, boy, that's quite a coincidence.
Coincidence, yeah. Wow. My mother tried to show, and it's kind of emotional. It's not really scary, but
No, this one's not scary.
no. But my mom tried to show. She showed us where she saw it, the
Yeah.
heart in the tree, and
Right.
you can't see it anymore.
No.
But she said it was a perfect heart.
Yeah.
And I've heard other stories, other people. You can go online right now, and my mom doesn't surf the internet or anything, but
No.
you can go online right now, and there's other people that have had similar experiences where they'll see something like that, and they'll immediately assume it's their loved one saying goodbye, you know.
Yeah.
And then those butterflies, I told myself I was going to look them up, and I probably will by the time we post this.
There's a lot of people that see butterflies. It's happened, and it doesn't always happen right after the person passes away. It could be like you're just thinking of that person, or that person, a song might come on the radio, or you might drive by a street and it's the person's last name, or it's trust me, it's happened, and I've had that experience before too. So it's very interesting. This is not really a scary thing. It's kind of like a sentimental thing, but it makes, us think about our loved ones and that have gone past, that have gone on to the next chapter.
I think that's a trip though, the V's.
Oh yeah.
Specifically the
Yeah,
V's on the butterflies. I think that's
Yeah.
really trippy. We should look that up and see if a butterfly
And
exists like that.
when your mom said that, I didn't even think about the two. I was like, oh yeah, Victor and Valentina, they're both
'cause
V's.
I'm
yeah.
named after my grandfather.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
what was the when she saw my grandmother in the mirror.
Yes.
She said it startled her, and because she could see her clearly in the mirror, and then when
Yeah.
she turned around, she wasn't there
She
anymore.
wasn't there, yeah.
But she had this look on her face like she was about to say, like she was about to ask her something. That's
Right.
why my mom assumed that my grandmother was, gonna ask her, and she wanted something.
Yeah.
So, and I get, over the tombstone thing, what it was is everybody was so devastated
Yeah.
by the loss of my grandmother
Yeah.
that, nobody wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Get
to
the
finish it.
To finish it,
To
right.
finish it. And she wanted it finished.
And my
Grandma wanted it
I
finished.
guess my grandmother wanted it.
Yeah.
And so they went down there and they took care of it. So
Yep.
let's move on to the next story,
Yes,
shall we?
sir.
And I was driving our pickup. My husband is a professional driver, and so he had always warned me to stay alert. I had to drive that night because he had worked so many hours. He was very tired. And so on the road almost to Madeira, I knew my husband was asleep. My babies were asleep. So I knew that I had to stay alert and be careful. All of a sudden, I had this vision. It was very strange, but I had a vision, almost like watching a movie, and I saw this beautiful Malamute, white and black, with icy blue eyes, and he was in the middle of the road right in front of me. And it was just seconds, and then it disappeared, and I thought, that's really strange. And I kept on driving, and I almost forgot about it because, I don't know, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes later, the exact same thing that I had seen in my vision, I saw on the road. And by then I was prepared. I held on to the wheel because I could not go left. A car was coming up on me on the left, and I could not go right because it was dirt. I would have gone out of control. I could have killed us all. And it broke my heart because it was such a beautiful dog. I mean, I had seconds, and I just grabbed a hold of the steering wheel, and then I ran over the poor thing. But it saved our lives.
That one's kind of trippy too, because basically my mom had a premonition.
Right.
She saw a vision that there was going to be a dog in the road, and it made her alert because she was like, whoa, it was late at night.
Yeah.
And we were visiting my grandmother,
Yeah.
my Grandma Petra.
Yeah.
And it was a long drive. My dad worked all day. So when we would drive up there for the weekend, we'd leave at night, and my mom would drive it so my dad could sleep because my dad had worked all day.
Right.
So that's the scenario, and we were all in this pickup, big pickup.
Yeah.
And my dad always told my mom, if you see something in the road, don't swerve.
Right.
Don't
just keep going.
Don't kill yourself for a rabbit.
Right. Right.
Or a squirrel. And you hear stories like this, baby.
You do.
People will swerve to try to save this little animal.
It's the immediate response, especially, no offense, everybody, but especially for us women.
Yeah, because you don't want to hurt nothing.
Yeah.
My mom's like that. My mom wouldn't hurt a fly.
It's just that, oh gosh,
But because she had that premonition, when she did see the dog coming, and it was like, oh crap, and there was a car coming on her left.
Yeah, so
and
there's
it was
nothing she could have done.
And it was like a drop off on her right.
Yeah.
She could have flipped the truck.
Yeah,
so
killed all of you.
She grabbed onto the steering wheel with both hands and just ran the poor thing over.
And this was probably right when there was no seatbelts, so you guys were all unseated.
Oh, yeah, it was in
you know
the
what I mean?
70s.
This is, who knows? That could have been a bad accident.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? You guys could have rolled, or half of you come out of the truck.
I think 2 or 3 of us were probably in the bed.
Yeah.
Of the truck in the back.
Yeah, probably.
Just laying on blankets. back there. Because, the laws back there, you could sit in the back of the pickups back then.
Right, exactly.
So we were laying asleep back there. We would have been thrown,
that's what I'm
thrown
saying.
out of the truck. We didn't even have any
been terrible.
restraints or anything. So
and it's always interesting on those premonitions. I always think it's somebody watching over. It's your guardian angel or God or whoever, somebody above you watching over you and saying, hey, pay attention. Hello.
There you go again. You just can't help it, can you? Just have to bring up God and Jesus.
anyway.
Yeah. On to the next story.
Oh, probably about 13, 14 years old. And I had a mixed collie and an English sheepdog, my Dookie and my Brownie. And I had my 22 across my handlebars of my bike. Anyway, my 2 dogs and I, we go down toward the San Joaquin River, and I would shoot rabbits, cottontails. And I had killed a few in that area, so there was a big pile of wood in an old abandoned shack, and it was loaded with cottontails. But they got wise to me. Whenever they would see me, they would all run away. So I actually had to go very quietly, lay down my bike, and crawl across a dirt road and look over the side of the road down into the pile of wood and that old shack so I could shoot them. Well, I didn't shoot anything that day, and I got back up, got my bike, and I looked toward the river, probably maybe 100 yards, and there was a big field with real tall weeds. The weeds were maybe 3 foot tall, and out of these weeds, I look, and I see this black giant. It looked just like a mountain lion, but it looked more like a panther. And my 2 little dogs, they saw it, and I had to stop them and distract them because they were used to chasing rabbits. And I could see its big belly swaying back and forth, and it was crouched down and trying to kind of like make a small target, I guess. And it went toward the river, and it just kept on going and disappeared. I didn't dare follow it because it was huge. It was big. And I swear to this day that it was definitely a panther in Central California.
See, this is another one. The big cat, the big black cats.
Yeah.
People cite those all over the country.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a specter. I don't know if it's
Shapeshifter.
Because a lot of people will actually see them and have the mindset to go out there and look for tracks, and there's no tracks.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Yeah.
But they're picked up on security cameras.
Yeah.
They're picked up on the closed circuit cameras for the traffic, on street cameras and stuff for the city.
Right.
They've seen these things, these shadowy, large cats, and you can tell when it's walking by a car, you can tell it's not a cat.
Right.
Like a house cat.
Yeah.
Because that's what most skeptics say. Well, it's just a cat. You're just looking at a house cat.
No.
But what's a cat going to be doing out in the wild like that?
Right.
And my dad even knew because he was by the grass.
Right. And he said how their stomachs swayed. And
Right.
wild cats, they walk different than house cats.
Well, and the grass was like waist high to him.
Right. Right.
So seeing this cat cross out of the grass, he could tell how tall it was.
Yeah.
And it was taller than the grass. it was crouched down to go below the grass.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah,
doing
to
that crawling
sneak.
thing.
Yeah,
like
to sneak.
like cats,
Yeah.
crawl.
Right.
So it had to actually get down to go below the 3-foot
Yeah.
grass. That's not a house cat. There's no way a house cat could get that big.
Yeah.
And then he saw the long tail. He said it had a long, really long tail.
Yeah.
And it crossed and kept going downhill. So it went out of his line of sight and couldn't see it anymore. So
Yeah. It was probably a escaped circus animal. You know how those are always around, They're always in the freaking stories.
your favorite explanation.
Yeah. Gosh.
Escaped animal. But it could have been.
No, okay, stop, Victor. Stop. I'm sorry I even
I'm
brought
just
it up.
playing the devil's advocate.
No,
It
no.
is possibility that it was an escaped panther is all I'm saying.
Next story.
And the same river, San Joaquin River, I was about maybe 15. It was me and my friend Renee and Forrest, and he was like 50. We were the three of us were 15 years old, but of course Forrest was 6'1", and I had my 22. We found this big sandbar, and we decided to spend the night. We had our bikes, and we went swimming. It was kind of like maybe in that part of the river next to the sandbar, the river was probably maybe 7-8 feet deep, and we would dive down into the sandy, stony bottom, and we would pick up freshwater clams, and we were using them for bait to catch catfish. And so we had a couple of hooks out there, and around this little bend, there was real deep and dark water and a few trees there. So we would throw our lines in there, and then we'd go swimming. Well, in one of those times that we dove down, I mean clear, like if it was right next to me. We were underwater, all three of us, grabbing the freshwater clams, when I heard this cry. I mean cry, like a woman in agony and a lot of pain and sorrow. And I shot straight up, and all three of us came out of the water at the same time, and we looked at one another. And my friend Forrest, he was from the state of Arkansas, he said, "What the heck was that?" And I said, "I think it's La Llorona." He said, "Llorona? What the heck's a Llorona?" And I said, "It's a story about a woman who threw her children. Her husband left her for another woman, and she was so distraught that she actually threw her children. She had 2 kids. She threw them into the river. And after she did it, she regretted it, and she dove in trying to save them, and all 3 drowned. And as the story goes, God punished her and told her, 'You will wander on all the rivers and streams, and you can only come into heaven when you find your children.'" So I told him that story, and I think that's what we heard, because it was clear. We only heard it once, but it was loud and clear. A woman was screaming her head off, crying her eyes out.
Scary.
So that's the story of La Llorona.
Now, the story of La Llorona has changed. That was the original story that I heard from my father, that he heard from I believe it was my great-grandmother, his grandmother. And that's the story, that her husband left her, and she was so angry at him, to punish him, she drowned both of her children. And then she decided to kill herself. So my dad said that she tried to rescue him. That's not the way I remember him telling the story.
Yeah.
She drowned him and then killed herself, which, in religious...
Oh, there you go.
No.
Yeah.
But religiously
frowned on.
speaking, that's the
Frowned on.
ultimate sin.
Yeah.
Just to take your own life.
Right.
It's the ultimate sin.
Right.
It's one of the only things that they say God won't forgive you for. So because she did that, she was cursed. God cursed her to wander all the waterways looking for her children. And of course, because they're dead, she'll never find them.
Correct.
So she's going to wander eternity.
Right.
Basically, looking for her kids. And they'll say that they hear that wail, that's just this heart-wrenching wail. And some people actually see her walking along the rivers, and when they go over there to try to help her, "Hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? Can I do anything?" She'll turn and it's just a skull. And she's wearing like an old dress with a big hat. And she'll turn around and it's just a skull, and people will just freak out. That was the story that I heard of, La Llorona. But now it's different. The folklore has changed a little bit, I guess. She was like married to some. We could do a whole show on it, actually. And it's folklore.
Yeah, it's folklore.
I'm sure. I think they actually traced it back, and they've actually had some names
Ooh, that's spooky.
Yeah,
That's real
some
spooky.
reality to it.
Yeah.
So, but it's an old tale. I mean, it goes way back.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go too deep
No,
in the rabbit hole.
that one's a spooky one.
Because to me, the trippy thing about it is all three of them heard it crystal clear.
Yeah, and came out of the water at the same time.
All three of them heard it underwater.
Yeah, which is hard to hear.
You can't hear anything
No,
underwater.
no.
But he said it was like she was like right next to it, like just I mean, like right there, crystal clear, and she was just wailing. So they all got out of the water. They were all freaked out, and they stayed out of the water after that.
Yeah, I bet they did.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Next story.
Next story.
I was a teenager, and it was kind of late at night. Full moon, clear. It was almost daylight. It was such a full moon. And I'm walking home, and I look up toward this big wheat field, and out of the wheat field, this big old black crow is flying toward me and stops to my right on the side of the road. And I thought that was kind of weird. And I took a few steps, and I kind of veered off to the left to kind of walk away from it. And all of a sudden I looked, and it was a black cat. That crow had turned into a black cat. Well, of course, then I started getting a little concerned, but I kept looking for the glow of the cat's eyes with the full moon. I figured it would, the eyes would shine and glow.
The reflection.
The reflection, yes. And there was no reflection at all. There were two hollow black eyes. And as soon as I got past it, I took off running. And I took off running, and my neighbor's dog, as I was running down the side of the road, it was a black and white dog, kind of like maybe the size of a little smaller than a lab. And he came out of the bush. He didn't recognize me, I guess, because I was running at night. And he, wow, 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 he barked at me, and he scared the heck out of me. And so I ran in the house, and then I told my grandpa what had happened. And my grandfather said, well, it was just probably, you're up to no good. It's probably the devil coming to scare you.
Well, how much did your dad have to drink that night?
I bet you that's a response for a lot of the people listening.
Yeah.
Because it's always booze, and you know
Yeah.
how I feel about that.
Yeah.
Because booze is like a serious hallucinogen.
Yeah.
The only thing that I want to add to that story is I remember the eerie part that freaked me out when my dad was telling us that story was he said that as he was walking by the cat and he could see the pits, that they were just empty pits. There was no eyes, no eyeballs. That as he was walking by it was slowly turning its head and following him as he walked by.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, so we were like, ugh. And then he's like terrified. So he's flying. His feet were just like, and then that dog went and scared he said he almost soiled himself. It scared him so bad. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's just scary. Just like how it shifted and ugh.
Yeah. All right. Next story, please.
Yes.
And another time I came home, and I had my friends and I had drank a little bit of that cheap wine. And so I got home. I walked into the room. We had two twin beds. I slept in my grandfather's room. And my grandfather was in his bed, so I jumped into bed. And I was moving around trying to get comfortable. And I put my foot on a cold man's hand. I leaped out of my bed, clear, and landed in my grandfather's bed. And I said, Grandpa, I just felt the cold hand. And he says, yeah, I know. He says, I've had a little black shadow jumping up and down my chest, and it jumps off the bed, and he pulls my hair, and then he jumps back on my bed. But I didn't see any black shadow, only my grandfather saw it. And that's when I went under the pillow and took cover.
Okay, that one I remember my father describing when he turned, he could feel the knuckles on the bottom of his foot. I mean, he could actually feel the knuckles on his hand. And it was one of the things that scared him the most because it was right there. I mean, it was like reaching for him or something, or it just had its hand there to freak him out. I mean, why would something have its hand there under the blankets?
Right.
It's just a very odd thing. And when he felt it was like ice cold, like a corpse or something. So he, like he said, he leapt across the room and landed on his grandfather's bed. I mean, he cleared the whole room because they slept on the opposite sides of the room. It was a very small house, I believe. And they ended up in his grandfather's bed. And that's why I wanted to tell the stories of my grandfather because, you know, he's just like shrug, you know, oh, yeah,
That's what I thought was funny is like all these stories of your great grandpa. He's just like OD. He's like, yeah, you know, whatever, and he just moves on with his day.
Yeah, it just goes on, you know.
And that generation back then, that's, you know, that's probably what they, you know, that's what they did. Because I just remember like the biggest things that we thought were so big, our grandparents and great grandparents were like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, they didn't have to. They just dealt with stuff differently back then.
Yeah.
The thing, I thought it was funny because he's just like, yeah, well, you know. Oh, you have a hand on your bed? Well, I got a shadow on mine, you know. It's jumping up and down, pulling my hair. No big deal. And I guess it had just ceased to bother him, and it went over and bothered my dad.
Gotcha.
And that's why my freaked out.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to ask, and I should have asked my dad. I don't think we've ever asked. Was it just that night in that house that this kind of stuff was going on?
Right.
Or was it all the time? I think it was just that. And I think my dad brought it somehow.
Maybe.
Because my dad was shuffling around, you know, moving around in bed. He couldn't get comfortable.
Yeah.
So that whole time, whatever my dad brought with him was bothering my great-grandfather. Then after it finished with him, I went over and scared the crap out of my dad. So maybe my dad brought it or something?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. But I've always been fascinated with that story because I think it's such an odd thing. I've never heard anybody else talking about feeling a hand in their bed like that. That would, oh man,
That would freak me out.
I saw stuff and something did grab me one time. It felt like a person's hand. It wasn't ice cold, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It kind of gives me Godfather vibes, you know, when the horse is in the bed.
The horse's hand. That's funny. All right, let's get the next story going.
Next story, please.
We lived in, we moved from South Texas to West Texas, and my grandfather was a sharecropper, and we stayed in this little tiny ranch, but we always had chickens, and we always had a milk cow. Anyway, this one night, we heard a bunch of noises up on top of the roof, and my uncle, he had a little 410 shotgun, and this lechuza was actually laughing out there and making all kinds of racket. So my uncle went out there and took a shot at it, and it just laughed and flew away. Laughter like a person, like a woman. And from that day on, my uncle always had trouble with his one eye. That I guess he had it open when he fired. He closed the other eye to take aim, and he always had eye trouble for the rest of his life. He didn't go blind, but he always had eye trouble.
So, of course, now after you hear that story, it was a very shortened version. Basically, what I remember my father telling us when we were kids is that they used to sleep upstairs, and the adults would go downstairs, and, you know, they'd stay up later, but they'd make the kids go to bed really early because the kids had to get up really early.
Right.
And I guess the kids were upstairs sleeping, and they kept hearing something on the roof, and something was clawing and making all these weird noises and screeching on the roof. So the kids got scared, and they all ran downstairs. So my uncle gets his shotgun and goes out there, and he sees this gigantic owl sitting on top of the roof. So he aimed at it and shot it. He knows he hit it because all the feathers went, you know, but it just flew off, and it laughed at him like a woman. So that, in Mexican folklore, that's called the la lechuza. And a lechuza is like and that's a trick. We could do probably a partial show on that because from what I understand, the folklore has changed because now the Mexican people believe it's like a cryptid, like a giant owl.
Oh, okay.
And the original lechuza was like a shapeshifter. These were witches that had made deals with the devil, Satan, whatever you want to call them, the forces of darkness or whatever, and were granted through witchcraft and you know, their satanic practices, they were granted the ability to shapeshift, kind of like skinwalkers.
Yeah.
You know, in the Navajo belief.
Yes.
And these they could change into cats. They could change into owls, and I can't remember. I think it was cats, owls, and something else that they could shapeshift into. In fact, my dad suspected that when I think it was the raven, they're crows. That's what they can change into. They can change into a crow, an owl, or a cat.
Also, maybe that's what he saw.
That's what he saw that night.
That night on the street.
Was a lechuza. But he doesn't know because he doesn't know.
Yeah.
It just scared the crap out of him. Well, actually, it did scare him, but what really scared him was the dog barking.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating. We're probably going to wind up having to do a show on shapeshifters, baby, because I find it fascinating that when you look at the original werewolf folklore of it being tied to witchcraft, you know, these people doing these satanic rituals and getting like a wolf skin belt or a pelt that they would put on, and it would allow them to transform and shapeshift into these beasts.
Yeah.
And then you look at the Navajo belief system and the skinwalkers, which were able to basically do the same thing, and they had to do these horrible things like to kill a family member, to murder a family member, to be granted these dark abilities to shapeshift into these monsters, these weird creatures and stuff. But then you go into Mexican folklore, and we have our own shapeshifter, this lechuza.
Yeah.
You know, they can turn into different animals and stuff. I think it's just trippy that they're all so similar, you know?
Yeah.
It's just a trip, because now you look at like werewolf shapeshifters, they're like, oh, it's a dog man. It's running around out there making puppies and stuff. I don't think that's what they are. I think they're shapeshifters.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I have never heard... I've heard stories of adolescent Sasquatch and young baby Sasquatch being seen.
Yeah.
Never heard any of that for the dog man. Have you?
No.
Where you see puppy man or whatever?
No.
I don't know what they would call him, but there's no young.
Right.
So to me, that says they're not natural creatures. They're not running around out there digging burrows and mating. And no, they're shapeshifters. They're basically just werewolves. And I don't know why Americans, I don't know if we call them the dog man because we want to capture it and make it our own animal or something, our own
I don't know why.
cryptid.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah.
But that's basically what they are, as werewolves. And they'll even say, well, it's basically a movie werewolf. I saw a movie werewolf, people that see them.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what do you call it a dog man for?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never understood that. But anyway, I mean, it's kind of a cool name, Dog Man, you know?
Yeah.
And that song, that dude, have you ever heard the Dog Man song?
I think werewolf is cooler than dog man.
I do too. But I guess some of them say that they don't have a wolf appearance. It's more like almost like a German Shepherd. You know.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
very subtle differences between a wolf and a shepherd, you know.
Right.
But that's what they say, and I think that's why they call him Dogman.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it's fascinating how similar that folklore is, you know. So we probably will wind up doing a show on that.
All
but
right.
I think that's about it, baby.
Yeah, these were the stories told by Victor's parents. We decided to make this our Halloween special because, you know, they talk about folklore, they talk about certain scary stuff that's
Supernatural
happening. Yeah,
stuff.
supernatural stuff. So we wanted to present this.
And we'd like to put out a special thank you to my parents.
Yeah, thank you, Mom and Dad. Thank you all for listening. Share our podcast. Share it with your friends and family. Send us some emails. Let us know how we're doing. Send us some stories if you have stories. We would love to look into some stories.
Give us a rating if you can. Move us up the ranks, up the algorithms, and it'll help the show expose us to more listeners. And I just thank you for all your support.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Good night.